Hello, Dental ATeam listeners. This is Kiera Dent, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for being part of my Dental ATeam family. I seriously love doing this podcast. I thought I was going to hate it, and I love it. I love it so much because I get to connect with you. I get to hear how this podcast is helping you and your practice be better. So if you have loved this podcast and you are willing to share, I would greatly appreciate if you'll share with your friends, if you'll leave us a review, if you'll give us 5 stars, anything you can do. Just like you guys grow your practices, we're trying to grow this podcast to positively impact the world of dental. This is how we get to grow our Dental ATeam family. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the Dental ATeam podcast. We're your hosts, Kiera Dent
and Dr. Mark Costas.
Mark and I had this crazy idea that maybe we could combine a dentist and a team member's perspective because let's face it, dentistry can be a challenging profession with those two perspectives. And Dental ATeam podcast was created.
I'm a practicing dentist, a multiple practice owner, a dental performance coach, and the founder of the Dental Success Institute.
I've been a dental assistant, treatment coordinator, scheduler, biller, office manager, current practice owner, and international dental consultant. Mark and I don't just understand you, we are you.
Our goal is to positively impact the world of dentistry by sharing our lessons learned from the road in hundreds of dental offices.
2 perspectives, 1 mission, to help dental professionals reach their full potential. Welcome to the Dental ATeam podcast. Hello, Dental ATeam listeners. This is Kiera, and we are doing a totally swapping of the roles. You guys know Friend. He is going to dental school in Kentucky. He pops on this podcast as a total guru, wants to ask all the questions, and I love him for that because that's the future of our profession. But today, we're swapping roles, and I am going to actually pick Friend's brain because I am so intrigued by real estate. And Friend, you know real estate backwards and forwards, and I feel that this is such a cool way for us to grow and elevate in a totally different realm than dentistry. So let's dive into all things real estate. Friend, how are you today?
Hey, Kiera, thanks for having me on. And I would not consider myself the professional, but I would say I'm in the trenches. So I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can.
I love this. I love this because this is something that I think as dentists, as practicing owners, a lot of them want to do real estate. I know team members wonder,
yeah, for sure,
like, how do we flip this? And you right now, I know, are doing real estate to help pay for going through dental school. So it's a super cool side thing for you. So let's talk about how you got into this and then give some tips of what you do to excel in the real estate game. Because I feel like it's a total game, but I don't really know it all.
Yeah. Well, yeah, game is a good way to put it. I would say I equate it a lot of times to what you do. It's what you know. The more you know it, I think you can really take out a lot of the risk. So some people look at real estate and go, oh, it's so risky. Don't you remember 2008? And it's like, absolutely, there's a risk in everything if you want a reward. But if you know what to look for, you can kind of, I would say, mitigate it far more than just about anything else. So
that's a really good point because I do feel risky, but you're right. It's just because I don't know what it is. And I was reading a quote the other day, and I'm totally going to botch it, but it said something along the lines of like, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is fear walking. And I feel like that's kind of the thing. Like, let's walk into this zone. Let's learn what we need to learn about it. So it will eliminate that fear, which also eliminates of course there will be risk, but it mitigates a lot of that, like you were saying.
Oh, so true. And I'm scared to death of opening a dental practice. So I'm going to lean on you for that one.
Don't worry. That'll be our next topic. But I thought this would be so pertinent to teams because we all have questions on when do we buy real estate? How do we buy this? What are the best things to do? No one wants a bad deal. So Friend, tell us how you got into real estate. And then let's talk about some of the things you do to help learn more so we're not as fearful of going into the real estate game.
Okay. So I would say me getting into real estate started when I was 12 years old. My parents built their house and my mom was a general contractor for it.
No way.
And so she's one of those that there's no such thing as a challenge too large. And so she found out how much the general contractor wanted to pay and said, screw that, I'm doing it. So one of her caveats.
I like her already.
Oh yeah. She's some huge shoes to fill. Definitely a role model of mine. One of the biggest. But so every single contractor that she had work on the house, the caveat was, yeah, I'll pay you and hire you, but you're going to have my sons work with you. So I got to lay my first hardwood floor when I was 12 and loved it. And so that kind of started me in construction, which I did through high school. My parents were ones that never gave us money, but gave us opportunities to go out and make money. So that's how I got into kind of remodeling and started to get into real estate. And then after college, I, as an undergrad, they wanted to pay me $9 an hour as a chemist coming out, and that was not going to pay student bills. And so I went back to construction, and I worked for some construction companies that were renovating and flipping homes, and saw how lucrative it was after doing about 3 for a banker. And then, got my first, and then I said, I'm not going to do this for someone else when I can do it for myself. And it was definitely a huge jump and a scary one to do the first one. And, it's been a great learning experience ever since.
That's a very cool story. And I'm super intrigued, but as you were saying that, I'm like, I think that's kind of like dentistry. I didn't know how to be a dental assistant. We don't know how to be office managers. We don't know how to own a practice as a dentist, but yet we jump in. The first one's scary. I know my first practice that I owned was downright terrifying, and I made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
But you learn and you grow and you evolve. And it's like, well, I can sit on the sidelines and never jump into the game, or I can jump in, learn the lessons. But before I jump in, asking people like Friend who have done this since they were 12, it's super impressive. 12 years old. That's really impressive. I love that. So what would you say?
I've been swinging a hammer, but yeah, no, I agree. It's, I sit back and I look and I'm like, wow, I have been kind of in this for a while, a lot longer than I would think. But
okay, so let's start like the beginning. On our last podcast, you and I went to like the beginnings of billing, and I like walked you through how we do billing. So if you guys didn't catch that episode, go listen. Friend truly grilled me as a very inquisitive dental student, which I loved, because I'm sure so many of you have those same questions. So now let's go into this.
Oh, it was so good.
If I'm going to go into real estate, when I'm going to go into real estate, like where do I even start? What do I start doing? What should I be looking for? How do I even jump into this?
Well, it's a very good question. I think the first where you need to start, one, is the why. Like we do that with everything, right? Reverse engineer the goal. What do we want and why do we want it?
Okay.
And so in that, I think there's a couple different pieces of the pie. One is, how much time do you want to spend investing in real estate or that portion of your life? Because if you don't want it to be a huge amount, then I'd say you need to focus more on the team. Not that you don't want to get into real estate. You can totally get in, but you're going to need a more qualified team, or maybe not a more qualified, but a larger team. You're going to need someone who manages the properties. You're going to need that expert that fixes the properties, a good network of everyone to call for services, the realtor, etc. I think the biggest thing that can be done there is focusing on building those relationships, finding references, the ones you trust, etc. And I feel like that directly correlates to dentistry as well.
100%.
I don't want to be my own dental supply rep. I'm going to have to go find those people that that you trust and have you recommend me a great, supply rep, etc.
For sure. And it's interesting because make sure you really do that in dentistry. I was talking to somebody earlier today and he said, Kiera, do you set up affiliates and whatnot? And I said, to be honest, I'm not going to put you on or recommend you as an affiliate until I know that you truly are good, because I want my reputation to stay as such.
Absolutely.
And so I think
that's why it's worth so much. It's because you have such quality people that you do recommend. It's like, okay, I'll trust you just because Kiera Dent said to trust you.
Totally. And I appreciate
where the true value
that.
comes.
And same thing in real estate, right? So you start finding those people that you trust. Okay. All right. So figuring out the why, figuring out how much time I want to invest on this, because you're right. As you started listing that off, I'm like, I didn't even think about half of those people needing them on the team. I'm like, just buy the house, buy the property. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things, and there's always that, and it's kind of off topic, but there's always that surprise. I'm sure it's the way in dentistry. There's something you'd never accounted for that you're going to hit. You need a budget for it, but you also need someone to help you with it when you get there that's going to conquer that section before.
Totally.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So after the why, I would start to, it's still in the why, but, okay, we figured out how much time you want to spend, and then, where do you want this to grow? Do you want this to be an immediate cash flowing opportunity right now? I'm in dental school. I need stuff to cash flow right now. There's also different styles of properties that cash flow when you're 50 and 60 years old that don't do anything now, but it's kind of like stocks and bonds. It literally is a tangible asset of an investment portfolio. So there's different ones that pay dividends now, and there's other ones that have a much higher growth rate so that they'll pay in the future. So do you want to cash flow now? Do you want these just for retirement? Do you want a mixture? Do you want to diversify?
So give me an example of what a cash flow now would be versus one that's going to be within like 50, 60 range. Like what do those two look like?
Great question. So for me, and I'm sure you talk to someone who's done this longer than I have, they'll find different ways to apply that question. But I look at demographic. So if you're looking at a lower demographic area, the price of the house is going to be a lot lower, right? So if you look at the same house, I know Lexington area. So if you look at a house that's in Chevy Chase, this upper end neighborhood, the exact same house may be 500,000 there. And you take that house and you put it into a lower demographic, and the exact same house may be only worth 100,000.
I see.
Now those are extremes, but so what you have to look at is how much is it going to take you to invest in these homes, and then how much, what dividends, what percent yield are you going to get on that price? So if you take a house in a lower demographic area, you can rent it for a whole lot more for the percentage of what it's worth versus if it's in a higher income area. Does that make sense? So a home in lower demographic, I may buy it for 100,000 and I can rent it for 1,000 a month, versus a house rate by school. That house might be worth 300,000 and I can still only rent it for maybe 1,500 a month. So my investment via the actual amount brought in is drastically different.
But the one that's been like the quote unquote better area that isn't cash flowing as high right now is the long-term game because it appreciates. Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Demographic areas that are lower, the price of the house kind of stays the same. It won't go up near as much. It kind of floats at the exact same price point, and your rent will kind of grow with inflation. Standard 3% ish. But those ones in the higher demographic areas, you may just you might only be able to make your monthly mortgage payments on it for the first 20 years. But you might have bought it for 150, 200,000. And by the time you're ready to sell it, it's worth 300, 350.
Gotcha.
Depending on where you are. Yeah. It's that long-term growth you're trying to get. And sometimes that pays out even better. It just depends on what you need.
That makes a lot of sense.
Sorry,
Thank you for no, that wasn't, don't say sorry at all. That was very helpful because I had never thought of them as two different. I was just buy real estate, but yet you can have some that cash flow right now versus some that are the long-term game. Okay. All right. So determining what you need and what you want.
Yep. And another side of that is, do you want single family homes or do you want multifamily? There's phenomenal benefits to both, and you will have incredible real estate gurus argue both sides of the fence. I think it's like in dentistry with marketing. There's no one right way to do it.
I like the analogies because you're right. I'm like, okay, got it. It totally makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like, everyone's going to argue a different way. Now, my personal opinion is that multifamily, smaller multifamily, so like duplexes, triplexes, that's all I buy right now.
Okay.
Those are a much safer option for several reasons. One, depending on the interest rate you get, one side of it might almost float the mortgage. So, you only have to have it 50% occupied, depending obviously your interest rate, where you're at, et cetera. But one side might almost keep you breaking even. And then the other one is just sugar, icing on the cake. Another reason, I like to call single family homes the stocks of real estate market. And the reason being is when the market crashes, those homes crash with it. So homes are a lot more volatile. There's a lot more emotion tied into them. You can sell a house because someone loves it. When you start to get into duplexes, the only people that buy them are looking at it as a business perspective, right?
True.
How much will this make? I will only pay X because it will only pay me X, So single families a lot of times are cheaper. Well, not even, it just depends on where you're at. But they're a lot more volatile, I would say, than duplexes are. So if you're buying to rent and keep long term, I like duplexes. Some other people do like the single families, but we'd have to do a whole nother podcast on why to pick one versus the other.
Okay.
But
that's
the last thing I will say,
the surface topics of that, like, okay, what ones do I want to go? Just even help me know which rabbit hole to start going.
Yeah,
now.
Exactly.
Okay.
The last thing to look at with those is that if the market tanks, right, some people will, and I know it's terrible to think about, but some people will lose their homes. Some people aren't smart with their cash. People are definitely not buying homes as fast. If you look back to the 2008, 2009, the demand for rentals are going to go up.
Correct. Exactly.
And so, sometimes rent goes down. A lot of times it floats, and sometimes it'll even increase.
And I don't think you have to convince me. My thought has been, I want the duplex or what do you call it? Triplex. I don't even know the lingo for this at all. But
Quadplex.
That's what I want. I want one of those because that's what I was thinking as well. There's always going to be a demand for rent. Theoretically, I shouldn't say always. There's no absolutes. But in my world, I've always thought you would have more success being successful in real estate if you have a duplex or a triplex that you can rent because homes do fluctuate much more. Granted, I have no clue. That's just my very naive opinion on that.
No, it's very educated. I like it. You're already thinking through it. So 100% agree.
Okay. So then from there, okay, I know I want this for quicker cash flow. I know I want to do the the duplex. Like that seems more like my thing.
Multifamilies.
What do you do from there?
All right. So the next is, one, there's two sides of this. One, you got to figure out how much cash you have and how far you're willing to stretch it. What is your risk portfolio? And that's a whole big conversation in and of itself to kind of decide exactly how far to go. I have my formulas I use. I'm sure other people have different ones, but bottom line, you need to make sure that no matter what happens, you've got a plan A, plan B, a plan C, and a plan D. That you've got 3 different fail safes if something were to happen. If you get hurt or if you're no longer able to work, God forbid someone pass away, or if the market crashes and you aren't able to rent it. So, now that being said, that kind of ties more into the houses, but you still have to have plans of, okay, I'm going to invest this much. I assume that, if I get it for a 5% interest, this is going to be my debt service. Do I have, like you said, dentists, and especially you, we've got a different way that we're pulling an income. Our real estate is kind of what dentistry has allowed us to invest in. It's not our primary focus. So you just got to make sure that however you decide to do it, that there's a safety, there's a rainy day fund, and there's plans put in place so that if necessary, you aren't stuck, in the heat of the moment panicking. You've got, these systems to fall back on.
I like it. And I love that you're tying all this to dentistry. I'm like, you're going to be a phenomenal business owner because you are like, you're connecting the dots so easily for me that I'm like, okay, I got it, friend. I think I can do this. Like it totally relates to dentistry.
Well, it's honestly a breath of fresh air because I can equate it to dentistry versus, it's hard when you can't compare it to something else. So I appreciate that we speak a similar lingo.
I agree. Okay. So we've got to figure out those 4 plans. And I actually want to do a long podcast with you on talk me through what are the different scenarios and how do I protect myself? Because like you said, that eliminates the fear factor of going into this, of what do I even do if I get into that hot water?
Absolutely. All right. The other side is, and this is where I can't help you, is it's location specific, right? You need to really, really know your demographic, your location.
How do you know this? How do you figure it out? Because you say this to me all the time, but I'm like, where do I go, friend, to find this? Like, do I pop on Zillow? What? Like, seriously, I'm like, I don't know what to do to figure out my demographics.
I would say, and a disclaimer, and I apologize to any realtors out there. I have a strong dissatisfaction with them, but this is one of those valuable things a realtor can bring to the table. If you have one that you've built a really strong relationship with, this is where I see them being the most valuable. Because, side tangent, a realtor is supposed to represent the buyer, right? If they're on the buyer side, but they're paid by the seller. So in no way can they ever be a true fiduciary, aka have your best interest in mind.
True.
So, I know I'm going to make some enemies by saying that, but also just be very careful to always have someone you truly trust. And at the end of the day, just remember that the incentive lies with selling the property, not with getting you the best deal. So, however, realtors, if they're a good one, they will really, really know their areas. And so depending on what you want to do, they should be able to help you with that.
So what do I do? Walk down to Century 21 and say like, hey guys, I'm interested in buying.
Oh my gosh.
Like how do you find these people?
That's a good question. I personally do it all myself because since, I know the real estate market here, I know the areas that I'm interested in, and no one is going to take care of your dream and your money like you will. Correct. So that being said, realtors can be very, very good for specific purposes, but at the end of the day, you've got to do your homework. So one big thing is school districts. If you're looking at 3-bed, 1-bath, 3-bed, 2-baths, generally that's going to be filled by younger families, right? If they're renting. And so better school districts are going to yield, one, people of a demographic that are going to take much better care of your properties.
Sure. And
2, will rent for a lot more. So one, I'd say get a map out and draw the school districts, find the best ones and start selecting those areas.
Okay.
duplexes are hard to come by. So usually they're kind of sequestered in areas. And so once you find one, you'll find a lot in that area to look at.
I see.
So school districts is a huge one, actually probably one of the biggest. I made that mistake once. I bought a duplex. I actually still own it, and it's in one of the lower end school districts. And I've had people that called and asked about it. And then as soon as they found out the school district, they said, we love it. We would move in, but it's not in the school district we want. And I had that happen 3 times in a row before I found college students to rent it.
Oh, dang it.
Yeah. So
and we need to do a podcast of like all the things that you learned through the past of like, I did this and I would never do that again. Like that's where I feel you learned so much about this.
Well, you wouldn't even believe how much I've learned just by listening to dental podcasts, right? Like create your ideal avatar for marketing. Exact same thing with renting, choose the demographic or the style of family you want to rent to, college kids, young families, and then you tailor where you want to buy to it. So it all comes back to why and why are you getting into real estate and what are your hopes? Yeah. So that is.
Well, Fred, you literally just like licked the surface of this. And I know because you're on like college row right now. If you don't go to your classes, you'll get booted out of dental school and then you'll never be a dentist. So I know you have class. I know you've got class coming up. So thank you for taking time, but don't worry, Dental ATeam listeners. Friend and I are going to get back on. I'm not kidding. This was such a fun podcast because I don't feel like I was hosting it. I was literally just asking you questions because I genuinely want to know for myself. And hopefully all of you will glean on that. So friend, thank you. I want you to run to class so you don't miss class. But let's pop on the podcast again and to go into all things real estate of the things that you've learned from it, what you would, keep walking down this path. You've literally given me enough homework where I can go start on this zone, tacticals for all of you, figure out your avatar of who you want to rent to, figure out why you even want to do this before you figure out that avatar. Like, why is it? What type do you want? Immediate cash flow or long-term retirement benefits are you looking for? And then map out the school districts in the area. And I would feel those are 4 good pieces to start with right now. So we're ready to go for your next episode. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful.
So yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Kiera. It was a blast.
Thank you. Thank you, Dental ATeam listeners.
I'm so happy to.
Yeah.
I'm happy to get back in any way I can.
Awesome, friend. Thank you, Dental ATeam listeners. And we'll catch you next time on the Dental ATeam podcast.
And that wraps it up for another episode of the Dental ATeam podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.